5, 6, 7, 8.
ATX. ATX. Let's talk about the ATX panel.
15-year Gilmore Girls reunion?
Yes, which was 10 years ago because this year's the 25th anniversary.
Math,
Yay!
I love it.
I love math. Love it.
Love
okay,
math.
here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Gilmore to Say with Tara and Haley. I'm Tara. This is Haley. Hi, Haley.
Hi, Tara.
Happy 10-year anniversary of the 15-year anniversary of Gilmore Girls.
That is so accurate as it relates to today's topic.
It truly is.
I was having a really hard time with math, admittedly, when it came to thinking about the ATX reunion, because I think it's the 4th year of the ATX Festival in 2015, which is when they had the reunion. But my brain was trying to throw in like the end of the series plus the revival in there. So it's like if you count backwards, it's like 7, and then from 2000 it's like 15. And I was like couldn't figure out how we had ended up 10 years since this.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, I'm dumb. That's all.
The final result is she's a little dumb.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with being dumb by myself.
Numbers just aren't Haley's thing.
No,
well, that's
they're
okay.
not. Which is weird because I did really well in math in school. It's just gone. It's gone.
Listen, it's been a long time.
It's been quite some time since I've needed to math.
It's true.
And
honestly, you don't really need to math here.
I
should
don't
really just
know.
stop talking about numbers.
Yeah, let's stop talking about math in general.
Sounds
We're
good.
talk
Deal.
about Gilmore Girls.
We are. So on June 6th, 2015, which when we're recording this will be tomorrow, which is crazy to think about. It'll be the 10-year anniversary of the 15-year anniversary of Gilmore Girls. Not, the release date. That's obviously in October, but this is the 10-year anniversary of the ATX Gilmore Girls panel back in 2015, which was celebrating the 15th anniversary of the show. And it was probably, I assume, the first time that the entire cast or most of the cast had gotten together to talk about this show publicly in a long, long time, probably since it went off the air.
I don't think there had ever been anything that was quite like this, where
it was
everyone
incredible.
Was together.
Like when you are in the Gilmore Girls fandom and talk about the ATX panel, you usually know, like most people usually know what that means. It was very pivotal. And, they didn't know this at the time, but this was about to be kind of the foundation that launched A Year in the Life.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about the lore of ATX, which is a TV festival in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
ATX.
Yes.
One of my favorite things is when Jared Padalecki comes out with an Texas TV shirt on. Yeah. And it's like it's supposed to be like a heart, but like I like had to stare at that for a second. I was like, I text TV, and I was like, no, it's just supposed to be a heart, Haley.
Supposed to be a heart. Hilarious.
Yeah. But ATX is a TV festival. This was the 4th year of it, and like Gilmore Girls was one of their dream reunions to have, and they were all there. And the lore of the revival is that they all got together and were like, yeah, let's do it. We're free. And because they bring up a lot about, especially Scott Patterson, about the idea of doing a quote unquote movie or some sort of like reunion of them. And everyone's like, there's nothing happening. There's nothing in the works. And I'm like, do I believe them? Do I believe them?
It's difficult to say because I want to say yes, I believe them. I feel like this happened really quickly afterwards.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. And I don't know if there is, if there are quotes out there to support this or lore out there to support this, but I think that this was the impetus for, okay, they want something, and Amy wants to finish the show. The last 4 words are talked about a lot. And it was really cool to see this kind of time capsule, on YouTube, because it's available on YouTube, which is how we both watched it to prepare for this episode. I had never seen it before, which was really exciting.
Which I love.
Yeah.
I love that you'd never seen it before.
I had seen bits and pieces. Like there were certain parts of it that I was like, oh, I remember watching this, but I didn't watch it in real time. But I think that it's so cool to see this kind of time capsule. It's pre A Year in the Life. It's pre Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool to see everybody come back together and talk about the show the way that they do. And I love it because this was before the show really, it was when the show was really having its resurgence on Netflix. And I think that was the whole reason why this reunion was brought about. They talk about that often, or it gets brought up a lot, that it's now available for streaming. And so it's been kind of opened up to a whole wider audience that they didn't expect to have when the show was originally airing. And then when it went into syndication and ultimately had reruns on ABC Family, and
which also gets brought up.
Yes, it does. I was really intrigued about that. So it was really cool to watch. And again, me for the first time, having never seen it in its completion. And also, not only did they have the panel, but they had this, coffee with Amy conversation, which I thought was really cool. And so we're going to break that down today. Not like take you through it the same way we did with Paley Fest, but when we decided to do this episode back at the beginning of the year, we did not know that we were going to be, first of all, that there was going to be a Paley Fest event, and moreover, that we would be in the room when it happened. So I wanted to kind of see how much of this panel ended up sticking with Paley Fest, which is honestly a lot. There were a lot of things that I listened to that I was like, oh, I remember hearing about this at Paley Fest, or it was information I already knew. Yeah. But to celebrate the 10 years, Haley has come up with her 10 favorite things from this panel, and I have come up with what?
There's more than 10.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Cheater. And I have come up with.
Have we ever set rules and then kept to them specifically?
No, I actually don't even know. I don't even know how many I have here. I just bolded a bunch of stuff that I found really interesting.
Oh, so here we are, Vicky and Haley, for not following the rules, and you have your own rules. Whatever.
Yeah, it's true.
That's so Gilmore to say.
I think it's about 10.
But this, I think it's like when you go to the checkout and it's like,
and it's like 10 items or less, and you're like, this is probably about 10. I don't know.
I quote that because that literally happened to me yesterday. I was like, this is probably 10, and she said, I'm not going to count. That's odd. That's how we have to go about this. I'm not going to count. But one of the things that I love about this panel, like in relation to Paley Fest, is that Gilmore Girls has such a strong lore, that there are so many stories that, as it relates to either the pitch of this show, how it got started, like the path along the way / the end / last season, that I feel like that's what makes the conversation not only within the show so much fun, but just around it, because it feels so equally serendipitous, but also maybe just serendipitous was the word I was looking for. Maybe there was not an also word to it, but like talking about how Amy talks about the beginning of the show, of she pitched it, had no idea what it was about, talks about going to Connecticut and the vacation that she went on, and the idea that I'm staying in an inn, so she works at an inn. And I feel like maybe other shows have this, and I'm just not so deeply entrenched into the fandom and community, but I feel like that's what I love so much about things like this, is like it reminds me of like, oh, I know that because the lore is strong here. Yeah. But at the same time, learning new things. I mean, I had seen this before, but it's like it feels like things that specifically came out here that I can like pinpoint here.
Yeah. It was really, really cool to kind of hear, like you said, a little bit of the lore that we all know and love, most of which probably came from this panel, if not it being something that was reiterated from a prior interview, because we've all seen, some of the behind the scenes footage and some of the interviews that they've done. I've seen some of those things for the first time, and I'm sure there are things that I haven't seen at all, and I'm excited for us to dive into that as well. But like almost the DVD extras, if you will. But this was really, really cool to watch, and I learned some new things that I didn't know before, and I'm really curious to see if some of your favorite things end up being some of the things that I didn't know.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the way that I want to do this is I kind of just want to go, I don't want to necessarily do a recap per se. I want to take, of course, y'all, the listeners, through, the sequential nature of the panel without it being too recappy.
Yeah, because I think that also we have no relationship to ATX, but I would love for you to go watch it. Like, from this.
Yeah.
Like if you haven't seen it,
Yeah.
like if there's anything that we feel like is like lore that everyone knows, or like bits of details that we feel like are very well known that maybe you don't know about, go here. And
Go
I feel
watch
like
it.
you'll be in the know.
4 million views.
Can you, okay, I have to admit, before we when we decided we were going to do this, I was so excited because I loved watching that. And then I realized I had to watch 3 hours worth of content for this. And it was like that thing where immediately my brain was like, oh, I don't want to do that.
I
That
know.
sounds hot. I like, please. And so I like begrudgingly was like, okay, I need to do this. I'm going to watch it. 45 seconds in, I was like sat like and
Seated sat. Right.
Yes, just like so invested. And I like looked up and it had been like an hour and a half, and suddenly I was like, oh,
I'm having a
this
great
is something that you absolutely love, and your brain was like avoiding it just because of the time commitment.
Just because, yeah, I completely understand that feeling. I felt the same way. I started this yesterday because typically if I have to do, I mean, we know this show so well that if we're doing prep for an episode, I usually do it that morning unless I've already like, you know.
It's mostly because like having that prep right before is
very
really
fresh.
helpful.
It's really nice. I, however, really did not want to do that this morning.
No.
And
because like it's 2 hours for the full cast panel and then an hour for the coffee with Amy.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot to do.
It's a lot.
Right before ep.
Oh yeah, no. And I wanted to really savor it. I wanted to enjoy it. I didn't want to feel like I was rushing through it. And so I started it yesterday so that I could really embrace it in pieces. I did watch, you know, in the sections that we're about to kind of break it down in. Part 1 for me was, you know, Amy, Lauren, Alexis, and Kelly to start. And then part 2, they welcomed the entire cast. So I like started with that part. Then I moved into the entire cast. Then I moved into coffee with Amy. And I did watch most of that this morning because I wanted it to be kind of fresh, and I wanted to take some space from all of the information that I received.
Yeah,
and
because I forget that you're like learned, or a lot of this is like your first witnessing of it. But yeah, there was just something about the task being 3 hours long that I was like,
oh, I understand.
No. And then I started doing it and I was like,
wait, but this is fun.
This is your favorite thing.
Totally. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
So the first thing that really surprised me is that it starts with Ariel Kebbel, who played Lindsay. She comes out to start and I was like, is she hosting this? Is she moderating this? No. But for me, what surprised me is that she doesn't come back.
Oh my gosh. I never even thought about that. She doesn't come back.
She doesn't come back. She kicks it off and is like,
and
hey,
then,
are you guys excited?
And then bounces.
Never comes back.
Wait, Tara, I thought you were going to talk about the fact that she comes out and she was like, I know you guys hate Lindsay. And I was like, absolutely not. Don't talk about Lindsay like that.
I know. She's like, I've been on Twitter. And I'm like, oh my God, Twitter.
What happened there? Like, no. We love you, Lindsay. You did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But you, Tara, not even for a second did I think about that. Where did she come from? Where did she go?
Well, she talks about how she like flew across the country from like Florida to LA. Like she just moved.
No, she was talking about that when she auditioned for Lindsay.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're so right. When she auditioned for the role of Lindsay. But I just was so confused because I had to go back and rewind because I was like, that was like, her, right?
None of you are her. That's, oh my gosh, Tara.
Yeah, crazy. You're right. She did talk about her her audition process with Lindsay, and she comes out and she does credit not only Amy and Dan, of course, for casting her, but Kenny Ortega.
I know.
And I thought that was so cool.
I love. Well, now
I want to know where she went.
You know, in the revival when Luke comes over for dinner or he comes over and he's eating dinner. I don't know if he comes over for dinner, but I think that it's Emily who like no one says that he can't sit down, but it's like it's Richard's chair. And so I wonder if they didn't have an extra chair for her and like you can't sit in the empty chair because that's Ed's chair.
That's Ed's chair.
She could have sat on the ground.
I don't know.
So
funny. I have more to say about that when we do bring the entire cast on stage because there were some notable missing people.
Absences, yes.
Yeah, but we'll get there. Yeah. So it was just a surprise to me that she started this off and then she introduced the people who run the ATX Festival before they introduced the moderator, before they introduced the girls. I was like, wow, lots of introductions happening here. But to kick it off with Ariel, I was like, And then she never came back. I was like,
and then she never came back.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, Lindsay.
I didn't even know to say bye. That's so funny.
Yeah. But like I said, you know, they go through all these introductions and then we finally bring the 4, I would say, like true Gilmore Girls on stage, including Amy. So it's Amy, Lauren, Alexis, and Kelly. And I loved hearing from Alexis because the thing is that since this panel, we have gotten a book from Lauren. We have gotten a book from Kelly. 2 books from Lauren. You're so right. And a book from Kelly. So we've gotten a lot of their perspective. And we don't really have the Alexis perspective.
Yeah.
And so to hear about her audition process, because a lot about the early stages of the show and the audition process of Lauren and Kelly, we've read about in their books. We've heard about them talking about it, you know.
Yeah.
But with Alexis, I didn't realize that she was like sick. She had a cold. She had gotten a cold from a modeling gig where they were throwing water at her so that like it would bounce off of her body and then like crystallize because it was so cold. And so she was super, super sick and came in. And that was part of the reason why Amy loved her, is because she hated being there. And that felt so Amy to me. She hates us. I love her.
Yeah. I want the one that hates me. That was like one of my favorite moments, is something about that. And no, you're so right. And I know that Alexis is a very private person, so she doesn't like participate in a lot of these like panels anymore or interviews, and has not written a book like our other ladies have. But
yet, maybe she will one day.
Hey,
did I tell you that she was in the finale of The Handmaid's Tale?
I saw that. She actually got submitted for an Emmy, but because she had been nominated for an Emmy for a non-guest role previously, she could not be nominated for a guest spot, so she pulled out of Emmy consideration.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't know that. They got rules, them Emmys.
They do. But I literally gasped when she came on the screen. It was it was a beautiful homage to the pilot episode of Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
It was really great.
But having her perspective, she's also so dry. She has
so dry.
And it's so funny. But yeah, I think that one of my favorite things was finding out her like audition process and what had been going on in her life. And one of my favorite quotes was, "She hates me. I love her. I want the one who hates me."
Yes. I thought that was so funny because we've heard, like I said, Lauren and Kelly's audition stories from their perspective, but we've also heard it from Amy. And so like that didn't feel like brand new information. What did feel like brand new information is that it was around Lauren's birthday, or maybe was Lauren's birthday, when she had her final audition for Gilmore Girls, and she was testing with another actress. And I couldn't tell if that other actress was testing for Lorelai or was testing for Rory, because I know that they had Alexis.
I thought it was for Lorelai, based on
I assumed it was for
Amy's
Lorelai
reaction.
Based on Amy's reaction, because, you know, Lorelai offers to like give this woman a ride home.
Lauren.
And I'm sorry, Lauren. Thank you.
I love that. Lorelai offered to give this other woman
in her Jeep. No, Lauren, she drove her home from the audition, and Lauren's phone is going off. And it was that, you know, to tell her that she had gotten the part, and she was grateful that she didn't answer it while she was in the car with this woman. And Amy did an impression of it being like, "Can you imagine? Hello? Oh, I got it. I got it."
And she's just there like, "I'm in a strange town. I don't have a car. I don't have a job."
That was
like, "I would
funny.
have loved it." And I was like, "Oh, diabolical."
Diabolical for sure. But that part I didn't know.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
I think that that's the thing, is like, there's nothing here that I didn't know, but fave moments was, of course, Alexis talking about water being thrown at her, and everyone else's reaction to that. They were like, "Why?"
Yeah.
Because she said Home Depot buckets of water, and I was like, "Oh shit.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot."
And she was going to NYU at the time, which I also didn't know.
Yeah.
She, you know, was very, very young, 19, and, you know, trying to model to get herself through school. And she just, like, can you imagine just being like doused in water, Home Depot buckets, those orange buckets full of water, and being like, "I'm doing this for my art. I'm doing this for my art. I just want to get through school.
I'm doing this so I could go to school."
Yeah. Crazy.
Which which was fun. But I loved Lauren's reaction to being like, this was her 5th or 6th audition ever. I had been working for 25
years. Yeah. Crazy.
That was fantastic. I think that one of my favorite moments, because like I have some varying, like there's some like categories of moments, like of like how everyone reacted to something, or like there were just some moments that like I was like, this is so these people and these characters, and just like moments that I love. And it was Kelly Bishop talking about her audition and how she had the pages and she held the pages, because she said you carry the pages with you so that they think you're going to be even better if you get the job. And there was something about that she had worked so hard and she knew the part, she had memorized it, but she was like, I need to make them think that I have more.
Yeah.
And so she held her pages during her audition.
Yeah, I think she talked about that in her book as well, holding the pages.
I don't remember exactly, but it was also just like seeing her talk about it, like just like such an aside of like, you always hold the pages.
Yeah, it's true. It is kind of a rule of thumb. You always hold the pages, even if you haven't memorized.
Yeah. And I loved her being there just because she's got such a spark to her.
I know.
That when they get to her, she goes, I auditioned the old-fashioned way.
I know. The New York way, if you will. Yeah. It was really, really, really cool to hear from her and hear her recount a lot of the things, because the third Gilmore Girl, of course, is so fresh. You know, it's been out less than a year, and it was such a joy to read and to hear her talk about at the 92nd Street Y, and then again at Paley Fest, and also to read it. It's just...
I know. I already want to reread it.
Me too. It's so good. The one thing that, you know, Amy has talked about a lot and talked about here at ATX is that, like, you know, she said, I'll know who they are when they walk in the room. And that was true for all 3 Gilmore Girls, you know, for Lauren, Alexis, and Kelly. As soon as they walked in and read the part, she knew who they were. She knew it was them. But I love that they wanted Ed Herman from the beginning.
Yeah. That was like a request, not so much audition process.
I thought that was so cool. That from the very beginning, he was cast for a show that is really rooted in female connection and female relationships. I found it fascinating that she didn't have anybody in mind. I mean, we all know the lore of her pitching the story and not really having anything in mind, just a mother and daughter who are more like friends than they are like mother and daughter. And so I know that she didn't necessarily put like a ton of thought as to who would play these people in there before she pitched it, because it was such a spur of the moment idea.
Yeah.
But I did find it fascinating that like these 3 women are the central focus and the, like, you know, pivotal parts of the show. Yet she knew Ed Herman was going to play it. Like, he was the person they wanted from the beginning.
And it feels like, because like you can kind of find someone along the way, like kind of fall in love with someone. Like, she didn't want to fall in love with Lauren Graham because she couldn't have her. Yeah. And then once she met her, she was like, oh my gosh, y'all are so right. But I think there's something about Richard that it's like he's just kind of like a pillar of the family that you're like, who could fit that role amongst all of these like women I have in mind?
The president.
Herman, of course. The president.
The guy who's played the president.
Yeah.
That really made me laugh.
But I kind of put the Ed Herman of it all into one category. Yeah. All of the touches that they had for him, everything that she said about him. She said, fuck you for dying. We hate that you're dead and we love you so much. And all of them were crying as this was happening. Yeah. Because it was still very
so
new,
fresh.
Because he was the first one that signed up for this.
That makes me want to cry. And I had forgotten about that part, but I did know that.
He was so excited. And of course, it was, I think that it was December 31st, 2014.
2014,
that he passed. So it was like 6 months before this panel, and none of them knew he was sick. But everything,
which isn't necessarily true, because Kelly found out. Kelly was there. She went to the hospital. We found out in her book.
I think that I took that to mean, and maybe this is just because I read that in her book, that they didn't know he was sick leading up to.
Yes. And she says so much in her book. Yeah.
Yeah. But they had found out. It wasn't like he was gone. They found out then, which could be true. I'm not sure exactly how all that went down, how all that was revealed, but just like everything they had to say about him and the way that it they so clearly loved him so much. This wasn't just like a cast member that they worked with years ago.
No,
this was a member of their family, and it's so obvious. And I loved how much of an homage they paid to him, because they play, which it's not in the ATX recording.
No. And I was kind of bummed. I was like, show it to me. I want to cry.
Yeah. There's like a tribute to Ed Herman, but specifically as Richard. But if you Google it, I mean, not Google it, but if you search it on YouTube, it'll come up like of like fan videos of it.
Yeah.
From little reactions. And it's just a couple of scenes from early season 1 and then a montage of him and the rest of the series to Wedding Bell Blues. And I was like, are y'all serious? Like, it was, yeah.
Wow.
And it was so, like, putting all of those scenes of him together is just so cute. Like, it was like when he was at Yale and Ted Koppel's Big Night Out. It was Emily and him dancing in We've Got Magic to Do at the, I was about to say UFO, the USO event.
That's so cool.
It was so cute. But this was when they kind of did like a shift.
Yes, they used that as a means to shift into part 2, I would say, which is when they bring the rest of the cast out. But before we move on to that, the other thing that really shocked me that I didn't know about, because I know a lot about this subject.
I know what you're going to say.
That there were 2 Canadian deans.
Yeah.
We know about Nathan Weatherington, but we don't know who the other one was, and I want to know.
I need to talk to alt dean.
Yes.
Secondary dean.
Yes, I need to as well, because we of course know about Nathan Weatherington, who was in the originally shot pilot.
Yeah.
But
the unaired pilot, if you will.
The unaired pilot.
About earlier this year.
I need to know who the other one was.
Yeah.
He was evidently a replacement for somebody else. So I would like to know who that was. That was crazy.
I need you to come forward, second dean.
Show yourself.
Show yourself.
Yeah, I want to know more about second Canadian dean. But they did use Ed's tribute video as a transition to set up a ton of other chairs because they were about to welcome out so many more people. They bring out Dan Palladino, Scott Patterson, Milo, Keiko, Yannick, Liza, Matt, Liz Torres, Jared, Danny Strong, Jackson, Todd, and Brian, who, of course, play Luke, Jess, Lane, Michelle, Paris, Logan, Miss Patty, Dean, Doyle, Jackson, Zach, and Brian. Oh, did I call him Brian? Todd and, oh gosh, John Cabrera. I called him Brian.
You said that, and as you were going through it, I was like, okay, some of those people got last names.
Some of them did.
Some of them got first names. Some of them got character names. And I was like having a hard time. That felt like numbers to me because I was like, okay, we're doing hops, we're doing skips, we're doing jumps.
Just skips and jumps.
But we got it.
And of course they had a chair for Ed, which was really, really special. And
I loved the chair that they had for him because I remembered they had a chair left for him and I thought it was going to be next to Kelly Bishop. But then Dan sits down next to her and I was like, wait, okay. But then when we get to the end and it's like a leather wingback chair, I was like,
perfect.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course this is his chair. That's exactly where you would sit it. Like seat him in that chair.
You can't put Ariel Kebble in there.
Sorry,
Ariel.
I'm sorry. Where did she go?
I don't know. But the notable people for me, we have to. The notable people for me who were missing, Emily Kuroda.
Yes.
Who plays Mrs. Kim. Where was she? They do mention, because I was like, where the hell is Sean Gunn? They do mention that he was out of the country filming something. So,
and that his doctor recommended he not come because the change in altitude might make his lungs explode.
And we were like, sure, yeah, maybe skip this.
Maybe skip that.
Michael Winters, who plays Taylor, I was really surprised that he wasn't there. Sally Struthers, who plays Babette, and Liz Torres, who plays Miss Patty, she was there. But she mentions Rose Abdu, who plays Gypsy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, where the hell is Gypsy?
Yeah. And Melissa McCarthy.
And Melissa.
Wait, I thought that was gonna be your first one.
You're so right. Oh my God.
Ariel, Emily, Sean, Melissa, and Rose. They're all over there hanging out.
Yeah, Melissa McCarthy. That was one I forgot about. But it makes sense given the trajectory of her life. And
I know,
she's so, that was really when her career was like taking off. because Bridesmaids was in what, 2011? So like she was really like things really shifted for her after that. Yeah. Crazy. Wow.
Too famous.
Didn't even clock that. But yeah, I just was so surprised I wasn't sure who we were going to see. You know, I thought I knew, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah. Who were you most excited to see other than the girlies? I know.
I mean, I loved that the boys were reunited. I almost wish that they had sat Milo, Jared, and Matt together.
You mean Maddie?
Maddie, as they call him. I died.
Okay.
When Milo Ventimiglia was like, Maddie's the coolest guy on the planet, I was like, I love this so much.
He kept calling him Maddie. And I think that there was something about that like, there's like, of course, like huge big things that are great, but that's like the small. I mean, that's what Amy talks about. She said they make the small things big and the big things small. Mm-hmm. And that's what this felt like. It was the small things of like every time when Milo walked on, I was like,
oh, hey. And he was blowing kisses to them.
Like, oh my gosh. And then he called him Maddie. And I was like, oh. And then the high five when Matt and Jared both agree that they're Team Jess. Like,
I died. I was like,
so great.
I can't believe that Matt was like, yeah, I'm Team Jess. I was like, yeah.
And what did Jared say? He said,
Jared said, well, if
Desogen.
Oh yeah, Desogen.
Which is like the most me thing to say.
Which was like, yes, that was a very you thing to say. But he was like, Matt, honestly, if Milo wasn't here, I'd probably say I was Team Logan. He was really funny.
Which I love. I wish we had gotten to hear more from all three of them, honestly.
I know.
Like had a boyfriend panel.
I would love to have a boyfriend panel, personally.
But this is when I finally realized, I was like, oh, I heart TV, I Texas TV. It took me that long to understand it.
But when they start talking about them, about like Matt and Milo, and mostly when they get over to Liza Weil, who plays Paris, and Danny Strong, who plays Doyle, who, by the way, like at the time was doing Empire. Like Danny Strong is an incredible writer, for those of you who might not know. He's also doing an adaptation of Chess, which is about to be on Broadway. And I'm so excited. Yes. Aaron Tveit, Leah Michelle, and Nick Christopher are about to do a revival of Chess, and Danny Strong rewrote the book.
You have to read the book to her.
Aw. I didn't realize that Danny was someone who was handpicked by Amy and Dan to play the role of Doyle very early on, which was similar to Liza Weil, because I think what they did was they went over to Liza and they were asking her about like auditioning for Rory, which of course many of us know that Liza Weil auditioned for the role of Rory. And so,
which another like little detail moment that I love is when Yannick turned to her and goes, "You auditioned for Rory? I didn't know."
Who said that?
Yannick, there was no microphone. He just turned to her and he goes, "You auditioned for Rory? I didn't know."
That's cute.
It was really cute. Some of my favorite moments were just them,
the asides.
That like weren't even on the mic.
At the beginning, when Amy was talking about like building the world and how like, oh, what would someone in Hartford do? Work in insurance. So Richard worked in insurance. And then Lauren turns to Kelly and goes, "He worked in insurance?" I loved it. It was very funny. No, but what I loved is that we found out that there were so many actors who auditioned like Liza, who were like, they were like, I love them. They're not right for this role, but we're going to write a role for them.
So
or like they're going to be great. Liza,
Maddie.
Danny, Maddie, who I'm like, did Matt audition for Jess? That was kind of the implication.
I couldn't remember if he auditioned for Jess, but he's talked about who. I think it was Marty. I think he auditioned for Marty. And okay, don't quote me on that, obviously, but I remember he auditioned
twice for two different roles over the course of a couple years before Logan.
And I want to say it was Marty. I don't remember exactly, but I remember him auditioning for a role that was, I feel like I need to look this up. So just from a very quick search, it said that he auditioned for Tristan, Jess, and Marty.
Tristan makes sense to me.
Tristan totally makes sense. I don't know for sure if that's true based on what Amy says about Milo.
I was just about to say that because my note below that was that Milo was handpicked by Amy and she created the character of Jess around him. So
because she saw him and it's like all of us was smitten.
Of course.
Was like, I want to pick him up before someone else does, which like so fair. Such a good idea. Like unique, never been done before.
Yes.
Like excellent choice, because that was one of my top things, was that like Milo was handpicked by Amy to be in the show. So I don't think he auditioned for Jess, because that wouldn't make sense.
No, but Tristan makes a lot of sense.
Tristan and Marty makes sense.
Marty, to me though, it's like, then I really feel like Marty would have become a love interest if it was played by
poor Marty.
Sorry, Marty, but he would have been a love interest in my opinion if he was played by Matt Gray. I'm sorry, that chemistry would have been undeniable.
Well, there's a really funny Cara Bastone's Gilmore to Read episode. She was talking about the first time she saw Logan. She was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know a man could look like that."
I know.
So like, if that was the naked guy,
please,
please. Straight to romance.
I know.
There's no totally friendship in between.
No. So, no friends to lovers, just immediately
no friends
lovers.
to lovers. Yeah.
But I love that when Amy saw him, she was like, I know there's something here for him. I just don't know what it is. And him auditioning for Tristan would make a lot of sense, because honestly, he would have made a great Tristan. I think Chad Michael Murray, especially given who Chad was at the time, like, or who he was about to become, I think like he really fit the role.
He really fit. Yeah.
But I really think that their characters are compared up against each other a lot. We've talked about it in past episodes that like Tristan and Logan are kind of like the Chilton and Yale versions of one another. You could kind of interchange them. They're obviously very different, but like given where they came from, blonde, a little arrogant. Yeah, exactly. But I love that when Amy did decide that she wanted Matt for Logan, building the character of Logan was really about building a character who was so different from her other boyfriends, you know, in the past, because she acknowledges that most of the guys in Rory's life only had eyes for her. And she loved the idea of building out a college boyfriend who literally had 3 other girls. He's like, yeah, I like you. You're fine. But I also have 3 other girls over here. And I was like, oh, I love it.
There was this little theme with the boyfriends, as we can call them, Milo, Maddie, and Dean, which Milo, Maddie, and Dean, not right. Jared.
Yeah.
We can only
see what I'm saying.
Maddie. I know. It's hard. I'm sorry for making fun of you.
Thank you.
But we can only call him Maddie for the rest of this, by the way.
Yeah.
But Milo talks about Logan's character being a bit of a dick. And during this conversation, Amy talking about wanting to present this boyfriend who's like, likes her, she seems cute, but like, I've got other girls. And he goes, and Maddie picks up the mic and goes, you mean kind of a dick?
Kind of a dick. I loved it. I loved his like honest reaction to Logan's character. Not just in this moment, but later, you know, when he's talking about some of the choices that were made in season 7.
Wait, we'll have to get to that because that is on my list.
But I love that Amy was like, no, a guy in his early college years, because I do think that she also, and you know, they didn't talk about this, but they also kind of wrote Richard to be that way when they're kind of reminiscing on his life, is that like, I was just a young man in my early college years. And that's the
some sort of Lothario.
Yes. Which like, I don't know, maybe you were, but I think that that's the thing, is that like Amy writes it's a testament to the fact that she writes really real characters, and that she herself is defending a character that the audience has been like, and even the guy who played it is like, kind of a dick. She's like, no, hold on.
Like I was Amy and that was like, no, not mean.
No. But I loved that. I loved finding out that there were so many people who were so pivotal in this story, actors, you know, like Liza and Danny Strong and Milo and Maddie, who were handpicked by Amy early on to play roles, and maybe even had roles built around them because they came in and auditioned for maybe something else, or they saw them do something else and they were like, I want them.
Yeah.
She's known for doing that. She kind of did it with Sutton Foster, with Bunheads.
And Alex Borstein. That's what we found out at Paley Fest, which she denies.
Yes.
They both deny to each other.
Yes, exactly.
In that same vein of being hand selected and having a role created for you, Liza was talking about how, and I'd heard this before outside of just this interview, of her feeling really terrified that they had written the role of Paris for her. That she was like, oh my God, what does this mean about me? And it took her getting a little bit older to be like, oh, this is incredibly flattering.
Yeah.
But at the time she was like, this is the character that they wrote for me.
I know.
But I think it's just because they saw a lot in her that she could do that. She had the range.
She really did.
But I get the idea of being like, oh, so the meanest girl you could think of, hand tailored for me.
Yeah. So then, of course, they go around and they talk about where they think their characters would be, which I found really interesting. There wasn't anything that I didn't necessarily know. What stood out to me, though, is that like Liza, speaking of, says, I'd like to think Paris and Doyle are still together. And Danny from across the room is like, ride or die all the way, baby. And she says, just supporting each other and taking over the fucking world, man. And I was like, why did Amy not do this? Especially given how fresh this was and how the reaction from the audience was. That she then went on the following year to break them up.
And like ruin their relationship. I don't know. Okay. Because like this is something that I loved. I loved the chaos that ensued from having everyone going around and saying where their character would be. But I felt like that one was the one that I was like, oh my gosh, like it's so sad to watch because you guys broke up, but you guys were ready to be like ride or die for this.
Yeah. And I wonder how that went when they did find out, especially considering it was so fresh. You know, when Amy hands them the script and they're like, wait, you're like, we're not together anymore?
Don't you read? Are you sure?
Yeah, I know.
But looking at this, I don't really feel like there was any one storyline that she necessarily took into consideration, especially Scott Patterson being like, he left and he went to the lake and he opened a tackle shop and he was teaching Lorelai to fly fish, and everyone was just like,
okay,
Lorelai, fly fishing?
Yeah. You know, Brett has said to me that he feels like his prediction for Luke, or what he sees happening with Luke, is that he does get out of Stars Hollow. And I find that really interesting.
Maybe
as a prediction
would like Scott's prediction for Luke.
Maybe
out on the lake.
Fly fishing. Lake. Luke's lake. Yeah.
That's his.
Just change one letter.
It's like Swan. What?
Luke's
one
lake.
Letter?
Yeah, you change the U to an A and Luke becomes Lake.
Oh, so sorry. I was like, Luke's Diner. Which letter are we changing? I was like, quite a few letters have to change, but which one did you pick?
Wait, what? That was so funny. Man.
No, this is his new show called Luke's Lake.
Luke's Lake.
Like Dawson's Creek.
Dawson's Creek, or oh gosh, what was that Amanda Bynes?
Oh, Moody's Point.
Moody's Point, yes.
I think about that literally once a week. I literally just talked to someone about this like 2 days ago because in my book, the main character's mom dies and I don't want to like kill her in a normal way.
I'll whisper it.
And like make everyone sad. So I'm like, what if she's just, in a hot air balloon lost somewhere? Like so no one's really that sad, but it's like, because she didn't die. She's just not here anymore.
Sure.
She's up in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think about that like once a week. Amanda. Which Amanda Bynes actually gets brought up very disparagingly later in the Amy segment.
I know. I was like,
poor Amanda Bynes.
Yeah,
I know.
Poor Amanda Bynes. But anyway, the next thing that I had on my list, speaking of Amy, is I did not know that she had seen parts of season 7. I thought she refused to watch it.
Can we go back to the roundabout where everyone was talking about where their character ended up?
Sure.
The one other one I wanted to talk about was when Yannick was talking about Michelle, and he was talking about where he ended up. And he was so confused how Michelle even ended up in that town.
That really made me laugh.
Cackled because I was like, that's so true. Is he on the run?
Yeah.
Like, how did that man end up in that town?
I know. It really made me laugh because when he said that, I was like, wow, you're so right, my guy.
You're so right.
He's like, I don't even know how he ended up here, so I don't even know where he's going. It had to have just been
applied for a job, like got turned down for other concierge jobs because he has a horrible temperament and just ended up in this spot and just didn't leave because he got attached to these two girlies.
I also still don't really buy that he even lives in Stars Hollow. My assumption about Michelle is that he's always lived outside of Stars Hollow and comes to Stars Hollow to work.
That's what I think so too. But just like when he was like, how did this man end up here? I was like, I had forgotten
Everybody
about
applauded
that. And
because they were like, yeah.
I wanted us all to turn to Amy and be like, excuse me.
Explain yourself.
You could tell that. Yeah, you could tell us. But I absolutely loved that bit.
So funny.
Yes. Going back in Amy had seen a bit of season 7.
I was very surprised by that because I thought that she hadn't seen any of it.
I had heard recently that she was very adamant that she hadn't seen any of season 7, or the lore of A Year in the Life is that she had like season 7 assistants and like people were reminding her of plot points of what happened in season 7.
And it sounds like what she says here is, I've not binged it, so I haven't seen it in its entirety, but I watch ABC Family, which is understandable because Buttonheads was on ABC Family.
Which I love that
I just love that she's just got it on in the background. Really, really kills me.
Yeah.
And that she would see it, and of course, like, it's her show, it's her baby.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, let me see, like, you know, what we did with this episode, and there would be things she didn't remember, and she was like, oh, I didn't write this.
Yeah.
And
She was like, why is that walk and talk so short?
no, so long. She said, I remember the walk and talks just being a little longer.
No, her walk and talks were longer.
I thought she said that the walk and talks were a little longer, and I was like,
why weren't they longer?
Oh, maybe I misheard that, but I thought she was talking about how the walk and talks were longer because the show was slower.
Oh, see, I thought she meant that like the walk and talk in season 7 should have been longer. Like the scene should have been longer, the conversation should have been longer, but it was just so slow and short, which I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I took it as it being longer because, as we've mentioned on Patreon, these opening scenes, especially the quote unquote cold opens, which are really not cold opens, are just
take so long.
very long and slow. So
yeah, it's really like they could be the same length, that they just take so long to say the words that
maybe
which that was true. An aside, it's funny hearing all of these people who talk very quickly on this show, that almost when they start talking, you're like, oh, you talk incredibly slow. But then you just realize they're talking in a normal cadence.
And you watch Gilmore Girls, yeah.
Yeah. And I watch these people in Gilmore Girls. Like anytime Maddie was talking, I was like, come on, speed up. Come on. Like get the words out. But it just was like, you're not Logan Huntsberger right now. You are yourself, which is so fair to take a second to pause between your words.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, they go on to talk about the possibility of what happens in the future with Gilmore Girls. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that Luke, Scott Patterson, was the one who proposed or like talked about there being a movie on Gilmore Guys, because there was a Gilmore Guys mentioned.
Yeah. And everyone cheered for them.
Yeah, which was great. But it was moreover that I didn't realize he had kind of started or sparked this rumor about there being a movie. And I also think that's probably what, you know, incited like, this like
people were interested. Yeah. And like that reminder that the fans were still there, because I think it was less of him starting a rumor and more of being like, wouldn't that be fun that this would happen, like I'd be so down for this. And then it went viral in 2015's version of viral.
Yeah.
He kept saying it was just a little podcast, and I was like,
it was not a little podcast, sir.
It was not. That was a huge podcast.
It was not a little podcast, sir.
But it just seemed like it kind of got out of hand. But I think rightfully so.
Yeah, but it kind of reminded me of Lauren being like, I think it'd be great to do a Christmas special. And I'm like, are we about to get a Christmas special? I know. Could be fun.
Wait, when did she say that?
You didn't hear this? Lauren on Call Her Daddy, I thought. She said something about, like, if there was more Gilmore Girls. She was like, I always envisioned maybe we'd do, like, a Christmas special.
On Call Her Daddy?
Maybe it wasn't on Call Her Daddy. Maybe it was in a different interview. But she said something about a Christmas special. And Amy was actually asked about it recently at an award show. Entertainment Tonight, I think, reported on it, and they asked her, like, did you hear about Lauren? She's like, yeah, she told everybody except for me. I'm the person you have to talk to. And so,
oh my god, I would love no I actually changed my mind. I don't want a Christmas special. I want a Thanksgiving special.
Ooh,
Amy really loves good. Thanksgiving, like deep fried Korean Thanksgiving to the max.
Yeah,
I would love that as much as I would love Christmas. Of course, Christmas
well,
is
it would be really interesting to see her version of Christmas for the Gilmore Girls, considering what we got in season 7.
You know, if I was her, I would take those moments to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna redo this now. for myself.
Yeah.
Because we like famously were like, this was fine. It was fun to learn about what their traditions might have been, but I would like to know what they actually are.
Yeah.
Something that I really loved hearing about, which I think that she might be speaking about it differently, is her thoughts around the end of season 7, because she really wishes, and like she says, this is not how Hollywood works. There's rules and things, and she wants to live outside the rules, that she wishes she could have said the final cut on the series finale.
Yeah.
And that she said that she was just walking around her house saying, cut.
And Dan was like, it was a really big turn on. These two were so funny.
But there's just something so interesting about that. There's like a sadness there that like, I don't think that she's necessarily a very earnest person all the time, but I think that that's the closest it got to this like vulnerable feeling of like this thing that you love, this thing that you created, you put like your like blood, sweat, and tears into, and not being able to finish it on your terms, which is why her doing a year in the life, regardless of the feelings surrounding it, feels really important to like this project and to her, because you know who's not there? Anyone who made season 7. So it's like, this is her show. People don't remember the people who made season 7. They remember Amy because she created the show. She created this world, and it's remembered for the core of what she contributed to it.
Yeah.
1 through 6.
Yeah, totally.
So I think that was a sad little aside that like she said in a very silly way, but I think like opened up to like what goes on in her house when she says cut. I imagine it was very mixed feelings surrounding the ending of that.
And they asked her about that, you know,
Yeah.
they were like, how did you feel about not being able to do that? And she's like, you know, no regrets. Like, I'm not going to dwell on what happened because it happened the way it happened. You know, she speaks about it she's very poised about it.
And
but
that's the thing. She is very poised about it. And I think that she gets even more so as time goes on, like as we get closer to like talking about it, like at Paley Fest and interviews that she's done in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That I think that there's probably a lot more raw feelings in 2015 about it, but probably gets healed getting to actually do it in 2016. But yeah, I thought that was, she says more about it in the Amy,
in the Coffee and Conversation.
Coffee with Amy.
Yeah, Coffee with Amy.
But there was something about that just was like, oh, that really got me.
Yeah, totally.
At the same time, another quote that really got me was when they were talking about Rory having sex, which they talked about at Paley Fest. But she says, I'm all for a bunch of little whores running around. Because that's really what she said was happening on TV. But that wasn't Rory. But there's a lot of lines that I was just like,
yeah, totally.
Because that's what I did at Paley Fest. The moment there was some line that Dan or Amy said, and I was like, why am I not writing this down?
Yeah, because it's so good. I mean, Dan was also clearly, the character of Rory is very special to him. And we found out in a recent CBS Morning interview that he did very recently post Paley Fest that like Rory was really modeled after him. And he says as much. He says, I'm halfway modeled on Luke and halfway modeled on Rory. So like, you know, there were pieces of him that went into Luke, maybe like the little curmudgeon-y side of him.
Yeah.
And then the soft and innocent pieces went into Rory, which I found really interesting. But so much so that when she was planning, when they were like, you know, the network was asking when she was going to have sex, he was like, I don't want to know. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to preserve her innocence. Yeah. And he's like, she's like, we still tell Dan she hasn't had sex, you know?
Yeah.
He was very protective over her character, which I found really special.
Yeah.
I thought it was very cool.
Because I liked that he really liked the breakup part too. That was one of his favorite episodes.
Loves when she says, I'm ready to wallow now. And I just found that so endearing.
Me too. Like, there's
I want to give Dan a hug.
I think Dan probably needs a hug.
I've been very endeared
from
to Dan
us
this year.
I don't know. In years past, have you been?
I don't think that I knew enough about him. You know, it was always like Amy. But as we continue to like revisit things like this and, you know, we met him, of course, which was so special in meeting her. I just was so endeared to him. I was like, man, I love you. You know, because I already knew I loved Amy.
Can I be adopted? Can I be a Valentino?
Please.
Please. No, I think that there's something that, like, we've been critical of the show and the writing and whatnot as we've gone through Patreon, various plot points between them. I've jokingly said that Dan is your enemy, but it was just a bit. He's not. We love Dan.
We do.
But there was just something so endearing about, you know, Amy goes on to talk about in Coffee with Amy about how like men being sensitive means one thing and how it ends up on television is just not how men are. But like you look at her husband and he's like, yeah, my favorite episode ends when she's just like so avoidant of her feelings. And then finally she gets to the end and she's ready to wallow and it just packs a punch. And you're like, okay, it's fine because you've got it at home. You've got this like tender-hearted person who's like deeply sarcastic and very funny. But I just love the way that he approached the reflection of
I agree.
Finding out that he's a little bit Rory is cutie.
Yeah.
I liked it.
So then they open it up to audience questions, which I really loved that they allowed people to kind of, you know, speak their mind because there's only so much a moderator can really ask without, you know, opening it up to a group of people, because the whole panel, you know, whether it was the 4 women on stage or the whole cast, the audience was talking back to them. And I thought that was so funny. I was just, the copper boom and the buy me a boa and, you know, oi with the poodles already. It's, they were like talking to them and I was like, this is a little chaotic, but I loved that they ended up kind of giving them some sort of platform to ask questions. One of the things that the question I loved that they asked was like, if you took anything from the show, and Keiko was like, we didn't know it was ending. I would have taken so much had I known. It was so funny that she was like, I wish I knew.
I would. Yeah. But on that same note, my favorite thing was when John was like, actually, they took my glasses. They're still at the WB probably.
Brian's glasses.
And Keiko was like, wait, me too. And he was like, now I'm out negative.
Down one. Yeah. Hilarious. But I loved finding out that Amy and Dan have the original Stars Hollow sign. I thought that was so special.
I want to see where it is. Like, how do you display that at your house? Because it's the outdoor one.
I know.
I would love for them to have like a little garden in the backyard. Little Stars Hollow sign, you know, that's go so in Razquats.
Yeah, Razquats. But Milo has Jess's leather jacket, and that was so special.
Milo, one of the highlights was him coming out.
Him blowing kisses?
Like, just, I literally, like, that was one of my bolded, was just Milo when he walks out. Anytime he talks.
Anytime he talks, I'm like, yes, please.
I'm like, am I also Team Jess?
Yes, you are.
I'm a little bit.
You are.
After season 7 lately, I'm anything but team whatever is going on currently.
Correct. And it sounds like so is Maddie, because one of the questions was, were you disappointed in a character, like a choice a character made? And Matt says, happened a lot in season 7. I was like,
well, no. I thought, okay, so the way that I thought that transpired was that they were asked this question in front of the people that wrote it. And I understood the question to be like, you deeply love this show, you know your character. Were you like disappointed in your character? Like if I was Rory and I saw she slept with Dean, I'd be like, oh girl, what are you doing? But I wouldn't have hated the choice. I would have been like, oh my gosh, I'm disappointed in you, but not in Amy. But I felt like anyone was too like afraid to say anything. So when
that was like Matt's joke.
He was like, it all happened in season 7.
Oh, hilarious.
Because they weren't there.
That's so funny.
But I also was like, no, you're so right.
But you're also right.
Met your character in season 7?
Yeah.
He's not doing so well.
No.
Not doing
as
so
we're
well.
In the midst of really analyzing it, it's not going very well.
You know, as we're going through season 7,
but Logan
it's making me it's making me miss my TikTok days of like wanting to just like lay in to this man and be like, my dude, just get a job. Just get a fucking job.
Yeah, I know.
Not to segue into Patreon into season 7 right now, but my God.
I know.
Like, don't leave your job. Anyway, maybe I'll make a TikTok about it. I deleted it off my phone, but maybe I'm incensed enough to pull it back out.
Yeah, maybe she's incensed enough to re-download and just say something.
Maybe I got a series I need to come up with. But yeah. I'm mad at him. But when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, it did all happen in season 7.
That's really funny, though. I didn't think about it that way, that he could be talking about it because of
they weren't a part of it.
Right.
But also I felt like, yep. Because he was like, no, it's all a joke. It's all a joke. And I was like, to who? To who's joking?
At the time, though, I didn't feel like it had maybe been on Netflix long enough for us to really revel in rewatching all of it. Now we're so deep into it. I mean,
yeah, unless you had the box set.
True.
You weren't really like a true rewatcher at the time, I feel like. But my favorite question that was asked was the last one.
Oh my God, I wrote, who is the sassy queen at the end?
Who's this child belong to?
I
he
loved
looked
him.
maybe like 12,
Yeah.
13. Like he was like a young kid. And he gets up there and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so little. And Amy was like, no, I won't buy you beer. And everyone's laughing. He so deeply offended.
Because I was not going to ask you that.
Well, that's not what I was going to ask you. And the look on his face.
So funny.
Like,
really
wow.
cracked me up.
Like, if looks could kill.
If looks could kill, this kid would have. And
Yeah.
he basically asks, are Luke and Lorelai still together?
Are they married?
Are they married?
Do you think they got married?
Do you think they got married?
And Lorelai says, or Lorelai?
Telling you.
She says, my hardest one that I've been trying to like differentiate between is Milo and Jess, having to say Milo's name. Lorelai and Lauren, so similar. But the Milo and Jess is...
Oh, balloons.
Those balloons were Team Jess.
Yeah, they are.
I'm saying. I've been in season 7 too long. I need to get back to the other seasons where I can like Logan again. But she was very kind in her response. She says, I think they are. And he says, I'm very pleased with that answer.
That's what I wrote down. I am very pleased with that answer.
But it just like, he got them. He got her. Yeah.
It was so funny.
Yeah.
For
like
me,
that.
the way that this ended before this
Snarky
little sassy
boy.
queen came
like,
up.
how did he end up there?
I don't know. Like, who are you here with?
Yeah.
Before that happens, really the way that this kind of ends is Amy says, you get one. There's no way I'm going to top this experience, this cast. It's just not going to happen again. Reflecting on Gilmore Girls, right? And I wonder if she still feels that way after Maisel, because like all of this,
she can't.
All of this, I'm sitting here going, you have no idea what's about to happen to you.
You have no idea.
You have no idea that you're about to become.
Some people don't.
Yeah. She's like, in your career, you're lucky if you get one. And I got one. And I'm like, dude, you don't even know you're about to have a huge, like a second. Because at this point, it was just Gilmore and Bunheads. And we find out in the next segment in Coffee with Amy that she is writing the Maisel pilot right now for Amazon Prime. And she doesn't say it. She just says, I'm writing a pilot with Amazon. Yeah. And I was like, there's just something so poetic and magical about like seeing something, like I was saying at the beginning of this episode, like a time capsule, and being like, you don't even know you're about to become an Emmy award-winning showrunner and writer, and you're about to write a show that gets nominated for an Emmy every single year that it's on, and that wins, like that sweeps in its categories the first year that it's there. You are about to explode. And she already felt so lucky. And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah. And it's really emotional to see that conversation happening. I honestly wish I had rewatched this before we saw her in LA at Paley Fest. Because I would never want to project any sort of feelings on her, but this show was such like a flash in the pan, like it's never going to happen again. They even say as much, that like shows like this just
like
can't.
Gilmore Girls they don't work anymore.
They don't work anymore.
Yeah.
Just in the way that TV works now.
Meaning that they don't work in the sense that you'll pitch it in the room and it'll get picked up.
Or that like they
clearly still work. We're talking about it.
Yeah. No. TV's still around, if you guys didn't notice. Yeah. I can't watch TV, as it turns out.
Yeah. I'm not allowed. Haley can't.
I can't do that anymore. But otherwise I'd literally like, I feel like I need to it felt really nefarious for some reason.
Yeah, set TV boundaries.
No, I watched The Great British Bake Off, and for about a week I watched it until 3 a.m. and I couldn't stop, and it took over my whole life, and I had to stop watching TV because I just can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But all that to say is that it felt like she felt so lucky about this thing that ended quite poorly for her, that I imagine was very emotional to take this thing that you had worked so like this was a 24/7 job for her for 6 seasons, and then to have that taken away from you and not be able to end it, and then have Bunheads and have it get canceled. There's this sense that like no matter how much it's going to grow, you're still going to have that little bit of like pain regards to it. And I would never say she's like a still hurt over this, and maybe she is at this point, but to like know that she's going towards so much more, that like she has Maisel, everything that you just talked about, that she eventually gets to Etoile, that she ends up working with like theater on Broadway, you know, that like everything that happens for her, that it almost just feels like it's like right before it happens, and maybe the rest of it was healing, or maybe it wasn't, and she still has that little piece of her. But the most beloved part of the show is the first 6 seasons. So
I know.
Maybe that's helpful that we still love the show.
It just made my heart swell, because I do think that oftentimes we can get really wrapped up in like, especially if you do something really huge for yourself, or if you haven't quite gotten there yet, it can feel really like, oh, okay, either like I haven't made it, or like I did it, so there's really nowhere to go from here. And to know, like, it's just a reminder that that is always evolving and always changing, because Amy literally was like, I can't go up from here. And I'm like, you can, and you will.
You do.
You're about to.
Which is amazing. And even hearkening back to the very beginning of this, which was Dan and her talking about how, or she was talking about how Dan was helping her through not wanting to write for TV anymore, that it just all felt bad, and like she couldn't write anymore. He was like, just write whatever you want to write, just write something you want to write.
Yeah.
And it ended up being Gilmore Girls, and
even though Maisel won so many accolades and is so good, and again, I say it every time we bring it up, I can't wait to watch it with you, it's incredible, Gilmore Girls will be her legacy.
Yeah,
always. It will be her legacy,
Gilmore Girls,
because it is so, I mean, look at what it's become, what it's evolved into.
Our job.
Yep, quite literally. Thank you so much. So it's, despite the fact that Maisel, again, like, was probably her most well-decorated show when it comes to awards, and she had the budget, and I mean, again, she skyrocketed, as did the show. This show will still continue to be her legacy. And I think that's really special.
And I do think it has a lot to do with the lore surrounding it. Like they talked about, because like Maisel just doesn't have that, at least not from what I've heard. Like it's not in the same, like the pitch, like the research, the going on the vacation to Connecticut, like how that all came together, that she said it was pixie dust, that Alexis and Lauren even looked alike, blue eyes, brown hair, like she said contacts, hair dye, but it just all came together so naturally and magically that it just feels like, it feels so perfect.
Yeah, totally.
On that like ending of Gilmore Girls, I guess, when they start talking about the last 4 words, the only people that know it are her and Dan, and the moderator is like, does anyone else want to know? And Lauren says, no, I would not want to know the last 4 words out of context, whether I'm saying them or I'm hearing someone else say them, because it would make me too sad for what could have been. I'd only want to hear them as they're meant to be heard.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Same. If I had heard those last 4 words out of context, I would have not wanted to.
And I mean, little does she know, she only has to wait like 6 months after this.
I know.
For there to be.
Am I misremembering from her book that she didn't find out until it was in the script?
I don't remember, admittedly.
I don't remember. But yeah, no, they're really soon gonna get into this.
I know, it happens very quickly, considering I think they started shooting A Year in the Life in February of 2016. And this is June of 2015. So it's about to happen real fast.
Yeah.
So it was very cool. But there was also a segment called Coffee with Amy that I just want to get into really quickly before we wrap this up.
It repeats a lot of what happened. It repeats a lot of what happened. The main panel. A couple of new things come out of it. But for the most part, it was just more in depth of what
just with her.
Said. Yeah.
Things that I learned that I didn't know. I loved that Kim's Antiques was based off of a store Amy and Dan used to go to called Bountiful. And she said, it's closing because all good things die. And I was like, oh.
One of the things that I loved about this is like Amy acts like she's 800 years old.
I know.
Because she says like one of our favorite like Amy-isms, which is you're blank years old.
Yeah.
Because she said in the panel, you're 8 years old.
Yep.
And in this one, she goes, you guys don't know that. You're 8 years old.
Yeah. She loves to say that. And Amy
she loves that.
When something else she goes on to talk about is that she you know, they ask her about leaving the show in season 6 and, you know, how that felt. And she was like, you know, we left this show in the hands of our writers, people we trusted, blah, blah, blah. And I was so surprised to hear that, because I know that there are writers in that room. We've talked about them before. When we go through season 7 on Patreon, we're like, oh, this person and that person. And of course, we've talked
Rebecca
about
Rand Kirshner and
David
S.
S.
Rosenthal. Those are the ones that they had worked with before. My favorite part of this is she basically said, we didn't leave it to a terrorist.
Yeah.
She said, we left it with writers we had worked
with before who knew, who had like gone through this with us. But that is a testament, watching season 7 and speaking of it the way that we have and continue to, is a testament to the fact that Amy and Dan really did have their hands in all of it, because the magic is just not there. And
it's gone.
You know, I feel badly talking about it because I know they were just doing their best, but at the same time, it just wasn't the same.
You can do your best and it still not be that good.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Which, there was something else that she said that was in that same vein, which was, if you say this stuff slow, it's going to blow. And that was a line that I loved so much about her banter.
Yeah.
Because she said she doesn't feel like she has the gold standard of banter, which is what the moderator had said about what people think of her dialogue, which I really liked the moderator in this conversation.
I thought she was
I thought she was really fun.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of she's writing this. If you say the stuff slow, it's going to blow, because it's just kind of nonsense. And I was like, that's so fair that if you slowed this show down,
might not be as exciting.
What are we even talking about?
Part of what makes it funny is the back and forth and the fact that you just drive by some of these lines and then like it's almost like it's flown past you and it takes you a second to like acknowledge it and laugh at it because it was like so funny, but it's such a drive by and they keep going. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. And I think that that's part of the magic that's lost in season 7, is that the show slows down. And
the banter really does.
Yeah.
And I like when she's talking about having really natural conversations, and the way that they do that in the writer's room is they had to figure out a bunch of different ways, because it wasn't something that would like she'd think too hard about. She'd just start talking and let it come out. And the moment it was out of her mouth, she forgot. And like,
that's so
you guys, if you guys could be in our meetings that me and Tara have, we call them town meetings.
Yeah.
It's just us. We're like, she'll ask me something and I'll say it. And she goes, wait, can you say it again?
And she'll go, no.
Not a chance. Like she was like, we've tried tape recorders, etc. And I was like, sometimes we just have to like record our meetings just so we could go back to what I said, because we'll be sending an email, writing copy, doing something, writing a caption,
and I'll be like, that was great, say it again. She's like, I can't. It's gone.
I can't remember even one word that just came out of my mouth. And when I said that, I was like, that's so me and Tara.
Yeah, it's so true. That's so us.
My favorite thing that came out of this that they were talking about was something that she hadn't talked about in Paley, or she hadn't talked about in the panel, was about fighting to get Melissa McCarthy. Yes. And I thought that this was really interesting because they were dancing around the conversation of body type.
Yes.
They weren't coming out and like exactly saying it, but it seemed like they agreed that she was phenomenally talented, but that because of her body type, because she wasn't skinny, they weren't sure about her. They never said those exact words, but that was what they were dancing around.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down here. I said, speaking of Suki, because I had a note before that about them talking about how they had added so many additional scenes to the pilot because they had to kind of pad the pilot because it wasn't long enough, and legally they had to have a certain, like, they had to pass a certain threshold of minutes in order to stream it. And I said, like, just an aside, I'm so glad that they did, because some of those scenes, specifically the one with Suki where she's like, sell my car or take my car, and she's like, honey, nobody wants your car.
Yeah.
Like that to
this
me,
when they're having wine, and that's like
they're having wine on the porch.
Happened.
Yeah, but I love that. I think that adds something so special to it, and especially to the relationship between Suki and Lorelai. So I just felt like the pilot wouldn't have been the same if it had aired the way that it was. The unaired pilot, I guess, if you look at that in its entirety,
the structure,
that's the structure of what would have happened. Of course, some of the scenes would have been reshot because of Jared Padalecki and Melissa McCarthy, but that's when I wrote,
or
second,
third
first
and
dean,
second dean.
whatever, yeah. But I said,
chopped.
speaking of Suki, Amy had to fight for Melissa, and it took a while for them to get on board. And she mentioned something like, we didn't write the character of Suki to be a specific body type or look a certain way. And this is where I wrote, maybe because of body type, is this what they were alluding to? Because they really didn't say it out loud.
They didn't say it, but that is what it felt like. And the thing about it, though, is that Amy kept pushing for the fact that like Melissa had something different, and like look at her now, that like she saw how like talented she was, and that she had a different vibe for the show, that like she didn't have the same
dryness.
She never actually identified what it was that was like different. She just had a different vibe compared to it. She was bringing something different to the show.
Yeah, it's a secret sauce.
Which can be scary to bring something different, but that's what makes her so her. Like, look at her now. And I thought that was interesting that she fought for her so hard, because this was kind of launching Melissa's career as
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And it's not as Melissa McCarthy, like who she is now, because she's so different in this role. But I really think it, like, if you look at Melissa now and look at Melissa Suki, you're like, look at the range.
So much range.
So that's fantastic.
True. Yeah. The last thing that I want to leave this with on my end was that Amy does talk about, because they open the floor up for audience questions, and talks about swearing on Gilmore Girls. Someone asked about, if, you could swear on Gilmore Girls, do you think it would have changed the sugar? Is that what they say? Like the sweetness, the sugar, you had to like add a little bit of sugar in it, the sugariness of the show.
I forget.
That's exactly kind of the language that she had used earlier. So someone kind of repeated it back to her. And I found that
sugar-coated.
Yeah. So
sugar-coated.
Yeah. So I think this person said, like, would that have kind of negated the sugar of the show? And I love that, because we had just recently talked about this, about whether or not the palette of the show would have shifted with swearing, and we both agreed that it would have. And what I love is that Amy agreed that like the language was more about references, books, music, etc. And even though she loves swearing, she's like, I don't think that it would have really aligned with the impact of the show. And I agree.
Yeah, because she gives an example of like Rory and Lorelai walking down the street being like, fuck you motherfucker. And I was like, she said that would be a weird relationship with your mom.
Exactly.
And if it would have happened, it would have been few and far between, and it would have been impactful in the way that it was said. But just an occasional drop, it wouldn't have been in the same style as Maisel, where it's constant there. But I agree, it messes with the world, because she says it depends on the world, and it's a way of world building,
and the world didn't call for it.
It didn't.
It really didn't. But in Maisel, I do think that it
fits. It fits.
They're in New York City and comedy in the 1950s, and maybe people didn't talk like that, on screen, but they did on the screen. And she is asked what she's watching at the time, like, what are you watching, what are you reading, kind of a thing. And she says that she was watching House of Cards, which Rachel Brosnahan was in the first season of House of Cards.
Ooh.
And then goes on to say, I'm writing a pilot for the Amazon company. And I was like, oh my God. And again, it's just one of those moments where I look back on my life sometimes and think those same things. Like, I'm sure you do the same. We all do, where we're like, wow, like kind of that trend of she doesn't know it yet, but in X amount of time.
Yet, but look. Yeah.
And so this was really cool to watch.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
3 other little points. Most of them are just little cutie asides that I loved. Someone asked, where's Mr. Kim?
Yes.
And she said he got stuck underneath the table, and sometimes they walk by that spot and they're like, why does it smell here?
Hilarious.
And I was like, really? That's okay, sure, why not? She also commented on some of her favorite episodes here. One that really means a lot to her, in the same way that the breakup part 2 means to Dan, is Rory's birthday parties in season 1, because she feels that is really pivotal as to what the show is about. This feeling of like, you're going to get a hug at the end of the episode, but what you really get is this impactful reflection of Emily being like, I don't know my daughter
at all. Yeah.
And the other ones that she says were Road Trip to Harvard and They Shoot Gilmore's, Don't They?
Yeah.
And it made me want to, with you, go back through and pick out like essential episodes that feel like most essential to the story as a whole, because that's kind of what these felt like. Like Rory's birthday parties feels like that's jump starting so much drama. It's not just her mom and her fighting anymore. It's her, like, the reflection of this tension that's going to keep like this push and pull. I feel like the Road Trip to Harvard is pivotal for Rory and Lorelai.
Mm-hmm.
And they shoot Gilmore's. I mean, what a fun episode. What a great one. So I was like, ooh, this might be a fun Essential Eps episode for us to do.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
The only other thing that I wanted to comment on from here, mostly because you, my fellow Broadway baby, Amy talked about writing an original musical.
Yeah, she did. She and Dana just produced Violet, which I actually didn't know. And then she talked about how she was writing the book to a musical. Now, I know that she was supposedly pre-COVID adapting the book of Gypsy for a Broadway revival, which Gypsy is now on Broadway, and I don't believe she's a part of it. But I heard that and I was like, that's really interesting.
I know. And she was like, this is something your grandchildren are going to see, because if you think TV moves slow, which is so fair, because like maybe Happy Ending, which like just got nominated for Tonys. I was an associate producer for that in 2019 at the Out of Town run.
Wow.
6 years ago.
Isn't that crazy?
So it takes quite a while for things to get on stage. But this was 2015 that she was mentioning writing an original musical. And I'm pretty sure that was around the time when that show started. It's like original inklings.
Inception, yeah. And since then, you know, obviously she's gone on to Maisel happened. A Year in the Life happened. Then Maisel happened, Etoile, and she adapted the book for Once Upon a Mattress. So a lot has happened since. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's been maybe put on the back burner, but I'd be really
still
intrigued
in the
to
works.
ask.
Yeah. This was one of those things of like, I had obviously seen this, but like now more than ever, I want to talk to her and have her answer all these little like
answer some things,
to some of these things.
Like 10 years later, what's still true? What's still not true? Let's talk about
true or false.
Yeah. Again, it's just so cool to kind of reflect back on this little time capsule, and everything was about to change, not just with Maisel, but with the fact that she was about to start going into production and development for A Year in the Life, which was huge for all of us.
She was on the precipice of something, and it was fun. Speaking of precipice, there was something I wanted to ask you about. The reason I just remembered this from the very beginning of our episode was asking you about, did you believe them? The like revival wasn't happening. But the only reason I asked that is because at the beginning, Amy was talking about having written the first kitchen scene on the stationery of the inn, which Tara and I have been to, the Mayflower Inn.
Very cute.
Very, very cute. She wrote that scene on stationery, and they asked her where it was, and she said probably in a box somewhere, or boxes are. I'll have to get it out and see if it brings me joy.
Yeah, the Marie Kondo reference. I wrote that down as well. I did know about that. I remember hearing that there was a Marie Kondo reference made. This was a few years ago. I don't know if maybe I watched like the beginning parts of this or something at some point, but I did watch that part of it, and it made me laugh because I was like, wow, that's so funny that there's a Marie Kondo reference made in reference to boxes, because she then ends up putting it in the pilot or in the first episode of the revival.
And the way that she looks at Lauren, she's like, it very clearly seems like some sort of inside joke between them, that like they're friends. So like, of course, maybe she's like gotten invested in it. Maybe she thinks it's silly, whatever. Or maybe she's building it out and Lauren knows.
Listen, I will say that, like, you know, if television moves slow and if streaming moves slow, there is a world, of course, in which like they know something's being built, but they can't talk about it yet.
They can't talk about it yet. Especially because the moderator said if this was something that was going to happen, a revival, a reunion, a movie, etc., would y'all be in for it? Lauren is immediately like nodding. Yes.
Yeah. And the moderator says, is it a movie? Is it a Netflix series? So like there were little Easter eggs dropped. And I would, of course, love to know, like, at the time when you guys did ATX, did you know it was happening? And maybe they would be like, yeah, we knew it was happening.
Yeah.
But
because the lore is that there was when it was born. Yeah. But was it something that was kind of already happening?
And maybe the truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe it's like it wasn't official. It was just being like talked about. And then because of the ATX reunion, it was like, okay, we're doing this.
Maybe. Cool. I don't know. We'll have to get one of them on there.
I would love that. So that was the ATX reunion. I can't believe it's been 10 years. I can't believe we're about to celebrate 25 years since the launch of, or since the pilot of this show came, you know, premiered.
How did you feel about it? About it in general, watching it? Like,
I loved it. It was great. There was a lot I already knew, but it was really, really lovely to like learn little new things about it. And of course, like talk about it with you and have it open up more questions. And and just like fun little facts. It was just really cool to watch. And again, I think the most special part to me was hearing Amy talk about like, you only get one, and this was my one. And it's like, it is not. And
it's not. Which she kind of spoke to in the Paley Fest one as well.
Yeah, she did.
She got more than one.
She did.
Highly recommend watching ATX, which we can link this in our show notes so y'all can find the cast panel, and then you can listen to Coffee with Amy, and then Paley Fest is also online too if y'all want to watch that. Just have a little Gilmore, like I guess about Gilmore Girls binge fest.
Yeah.
If you're
it's very fun.
If you're Gilmore'd out,
and it's a nice easy listen to. It's a nice, easy listen. It's a nice, easy watch. You know, you can just do these things like while you're cleaning or while you're, you know, kind of, again, the same way you listen to us. Yeah. It's just really cool. So we'll link it in the show notes.
Sitting in bed, eating Twizzler bites.
I was going to say, I was sitting here on my computer. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. But it was really nice to revisit that. I really liked it. I
would love another one of them.
Like, well, we kind of got a little bit of it at Paley Fest.
One like this. Like maybe we'll do something for 25.
I hope so. That would be really cool.
Fingers crossed. Maybe they'll let us come.
Maybe. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Just like another TV fest.
Yeah. That'd be really great. So next week's episode, we have a really special guest.
Speaking of TV,
I don't know if any of you are Bachelor franchise fans out there.
They have to be. From like our Bachelor, like Gilmore to Consider way back when that everyone really adored.
That was really fun. But Miss Hannah Brown is joining us on the podcast. I am so excited. Oh my God. Yeah. She was my first Bachelorette. So I am particularly very excited.
My first Bachelorette was the first Bachelorette. Like I watched the first season live. What should I have?
Trista? Was that her name?
Yes, probably not, but like I did. So like
you probably shouldn't have.
I'm like OG Bachelorette. But she wrote her second romance novel called The Four Engagements of Sybil Rain. So she will be here next week to talk about her upcoming nuptials, her book, and of course Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, because she's watching it for the first time. And we are really excited to see where she's at, if she's finished the series, if she's in the middle of it, what team she's on. We can't wait to talk about it.
How she feels about Luke.
Ooh, yeah, can't wait. And we'll have more to say on that in the next episode.